All right. Is there anything else?
No, welcome. You have an amazing panel.
Probably have the Baron straighten his coronet there.
Oh.
Other way.
No.
There you go.
Right there.
Look at
Right
me.
above the nose.
Check. Yeah.
There you go.
The first thing that you were taught as a baron, baroness, or baronial coronet in general is how to check your orientation. and your populace will be sure to assist you.
Yes.
Well, yes, welcome everyone this evening.
Welcome. Yeah, we're going to discuss one of the most rewarding jobs, in my opinion. It is definitely the longest job, but is very enjoyable being able to recognize people. But, you know, it does come with a lot of work. And hopefully tonight we can discuss some of the things that come with wearing a baronial coronet and give people an idea of what it's like, both in the amount of work and the rewards that come with it. So
with that, we'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves really quickly, and then we will move on to questions. I see Sir Ambrose.
I think we should start in order of rank.
Yes.
So, Your Majesty.
Hi, I'm Vikingsson. I'm the King of Avacal currently. I was Baron of Borealis from 2005 till 2011. That's how I slid into this panel. So that's me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Your Grace.
Me, Duchess Stjarna. I was Baroness of Wastekeep. Let's see, I ended in 2014. It was 6 years. So what does that put me at? 2008 to 2014. And I know that because I stepped out of it and into the, as a Royal Highness of Antir right after that. So I went directly into the other role that I have played.
Well, thank you. Welcome. Viscount, Sir Ambrose.
Marian and I stepped up in 94, stepped down in 2001. In September of 2001, other things happened that month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got to be an ordinary knight for about 3-4 months there. I was knighted at that Eagles that year and then became Baron at September Crown, so of 94.
And we were the coronet of summits twice during our baronial tenure.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Excellent. I believe you were the first Baron I actually remember in the SCA when I started in
I'm sorry.
1997. So, but thank you. Your Excellency Finn.
Yes, I'm Baron Finn. I was the Baron of Dragon's Mist from 2014 when Stjarna stepped up as Her Royal Majesty, and then till 2017.
Thank you.
Although technically, if you go by the OP, it's like 2014 to 2015 with Faunus and I, and then from 15 to 17 with just me.
Yeah, I noticed that you have 2 entries. I think you're
I do.
Is it the 3rd and 4th or 2nd and 3rd?
I'm the 3rd and 5th.
3rd and 5th. Yeah.
Something like that.
All right.
Sorry, I'm trying to get someone into me. So, I have the question. I wrote down some of your questions.
And you know, also if you during the flow of this meeting decide, oh yeah, I remember that one thing, I want to ask about that, other people's experiences, so please feel free to pipe in and ask that question. Do you want to start it off with?
Well, I was actually kind of curious. His Excellency and I have quite a span of years in our SDA experience prior to stepping into the role. So I was wondering, how long had you been playing in the SDA prior to stepping into your position as a baronial coronet?
Or
Were you a fresh spring flower or a mighty aged oak by the time you got there?
I was the mighty aged oaf. She was the fresh. spring.
No, I wasn't. I think I've been playing for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, you
You were the mighty oak. I was a scrub oak.
okay.
That
Um,
sounds very familiar.
Hey.
Yeah, I think I've been in the SCA for 17 years
Okay.
at that point. Yeah.
Interesting. Was there anyone else that was like myself? And I think it was closer to 6.
Six,
I
yeah.
think I was in 6 years before we stepped up.
I was probably in that time frame. I jumped in because I did pirate stuff beforehand, and then really sort of jumped in hardcore SCA probably 5 or 6 years before I became the Baron.
Okay.
I had a unique experience because my boyfriend brought me to the SCA in 1994, but my husband took us away from this area from 1999 until 2006. And then we moved back, and we were asked by the Crown at that time to please put our names forward after only being back for a couple years. And actually moving back to my husband's hometown, which was his home barony, rather than where we had originated. So you can say that we have been in the SCA for a very long time. My husband had already been a knight in Antir, but we were pretty new coming back into Antir.
Okay. Thank you. I just,
Marian and
I know, oh, sorry.
Marian and I stepped down as Baron and Baroness at the crown tourney where Stjarna was knighted.
Oh, wow.
Well, now I feel old. Thanks.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I know that sometimes people are hesitant based on how long they've been in or haven't been in. And so
Mhm.
I was just
Yeah.
curious.
It would be very hard to do if you were very new.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with that.
We had I had a good conversation here with, like, I had tons of experience with court before I was a Baron, because I was Prince, like, I think 5 times before that. And then, we had a couple right after us. I think they'd been in the SC for like a year. And
Wow.
they followed us. They did an excellent job. So it's possible. But they certainly had about 20 million questions as they went through it. So I found that you have a lot of support, right? Because you're long term versus say a prince or and princess or king and queen. So you have a little bit more time to sort of come up to speed and get things moving. That was my experience with it. I don't know what everybody else's experience was, but
So I'm kind of curious. Oh, go ahead, Stjarna.
How many of you are from a barony that had the first original Baron and Baroness forever before the rule was put into place?
Well, no,
Yeah.
Wastekeep's original Baron and Baroness, Diane and Catriona, were Baron and Baroness for 17 years. They are either the 4th or the 5th barony of Antir. And at 17 years, the kingdom decided that maybe they should limit the term. They had never thought of switching people out before that time. So
That just makes me feel exhausted.
you think that made the job more difficult or easier for you?
much more difficult.
Oh, I think it's easier.
for
Oh, no. I think it's easier when there's no term limit. Sorry.
Interesting.
It kind of depends on the business,
Hold on
I
just a
think,
moment.
because
Sorry. We're getting to back chat.
For our barony, I would say I felt horrible for the people that followed them, because the first timer, the original crew really didn't respect the authority coming to the new people coming in. It took a long time to break that down. But I know, Dragons, what is it up there in BC? What is it?
Dragon's
Lion-
Lair.
Dragon's Lair. didn't they have the same situation? They had a Baron and Baroness for a really long time.
Oh, I think Lionsgate maybe.
Yeah, you're right.
Lionsgate did for
Lionsgate.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, it took, I was 1, 2, 3, I was the fourth. And I would say that that is when the cycle ended of deferring to the founding Baron and Baroness.
Hmm.
So we had an interesting thing in that our barony was made up of cantons, it was 3 separate cities that made up the whole barony, and then they dissolved that. So they ended Borealis, and then a year or maybe 2 years, my memory's kind of sketchy on it. Then they went back in, and the city of Edmonton applied to become the Barony of Borealis and move away from that system. And then we were the first new ones, so everyone was excited, and so we didn't really have to. I mean, we came from a group that had like a Baron and Baroness for probably 12 years, but and then there were a few after, right? But then they kind of dissolved it and then reinstituted the new barony. So I think we got lucky in that we had everybody kind of excited and ready to go again. A little bit of a different experience.
Adiantum was a little, I'm sorry. Adiantum
No,
was
go
a
ahead.
little unusual in that we had a yearly vote of confidence from the beginning.
Oh, wow.
So, people say it's the People's Republic of Adiantum, and in a lot of ways it's true. So I think the longevity of our early, we were what, 5th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a long time. Each one was a long time.
Yeah.
And we served 7 years plus 1 week or something like that.
Yeah.
And the person before us did not serve very long because of a divorce. But then before that was Pam, Isolde Priscellian, who she served quite a long time. And she did not have a baron for most of that, or for any of that actually.
Wow.
So she did it solo.
But at
But
any time, the populace could get together and say, yeah, this isn't working anymore, and send a letter to the crown. And,
Well, yeah. And
which is valid.
and when
How
we
many of you stepped up on your own land?
Oh,
How
I
many of
wish.
you stepped up
Oh, yeah.
on your own land?
We got to.
Yeah.
We got lucky that we stepped up at a July coronation that we were hosting. But in order to switch it out, July coronation is never in the same spot. And we had to switch to a different event to switch it out. But our second Baron and Baroness didn't get that option. They were on the opposite side of the kingdom and came back. So it was a big shocker for our people, I think, to have not to be there for the ceremony of
Right.
switching. So interesting.
Well, I don't want to name any names, but when Mary and I were ready to step down, and we were actually probably ready to step down a year or maybe 2 before we finally did, but that was because we kept looking at couples in the barony. We figured we needed to give the crown three choices, and so we waited until we felt like there were at least 2, and we figured somebody else would jump in, which they did. Although their campaign was kind of a joke. Basically they were saying, go for the crazy option. But then the thing that struck me was that the crown chose a minority candidate. The popular candidate,
Let's not go into names.
I'm not going to go into names, but the popular candidate was not the one chosen, and the crown did not reveal that to the incoming Baron and Baroness, and that was a bit of a problem because they thought they had a consensus that they didn't, and they did not probably work as hard at winning people over as they would have if they'd known.
Now,
And
I know, at least in Ontario, they're now in kingdom law, a crown cannot choose somebody that the populace does not support. So,
Well,
I mean, most of the time in polling, I think at least half the candidates have a positive polling. So
you have to
Right.
look beyond that though, because if the crown is choosing someone that was the third choice of every pelican and most of the laurels in the barony, they're setting somebody up for failure.
true.
So
And I've told people who are thinking about running for Baron and Baroness that, you know, it's the negative voices that speak really loudly. So you can have a bunch of people saying a bunch of nice things about you, but if you stepped on some toes, the crown's going to hear about it.
Yeah.
Oh boy, will they ever.
The
Yeah.
crown's gonna
And
hear
I
a
hate
lot
to
about
say it, the ultimate decision is the crown. It is not the populace.
Yes.
It really is.
Do you mind if I propose
Sure.
a name correction as we go forward to not just say Baron and Baroness, to say the Coronets to be more inclusive?
Yep.
Or baronage. So
Yeah, it can, that is an important thing to remember, that the final decision is with the crown, but it is also to remember, important to remember that the voice of the populace is heard and taken into consideration.
It's worth remembering too, Marian and I spanned a time frame where many things changed bigly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we held a polling at a baronial council. The results of that polling were mailed to the crown, and we were notified the next week
Oh,
that we had won the polling overwhelmingly and that the crown was inclined to.
Well, that's
give us
when
the
we were
job.
stepping up.
That was when we were
Not
stepping up. By the time we were stepping down, there was a much greater bureaucratic
Much.
setup going on, and we stepped down shortly, right around the same time that the term limits thing was put in.
Well, realistically, let's also admit that during our term as Baron and Baroness, the internet was invented.
That's true.
So, you know, things change.
Things did change.
yeah.
I mean, I think the internet did exist in 1993, but it wasn't like what it is
Yeah.
now. You couldn't do this.
You
We
know,
still waited to find out who won crown.
being pandemic coronets has definitely been a different experience from what.
Oh God, I do not envy you at all.
I'm
Yeah.
really glad the Prince and Princess of the Summits had 5 terms in Owertha before they fought this one. Practice for.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah,
His Highness has been known to loudly declare, I didn't get to do any of the fun stuff.
well, this is true.
I'm sure he will make an effort to come back so he can do all of the fun stuff.
Oh, I'm sure.
So we kind of discussed some of the general what can happen as we're polling. Without naming specific names or circumstances, what are some of the general difficulties that you felt that you ran into? Was there anything that kind of brought you up short that you hadn't necessarily been expecting?
Oh,
With ours
oh.
specifically?
With our step
I'm
up. or
sorry,
our step down?
There's a hand raised. Anna?
Okay.
There you go.
Baroness
Sorry.
Anna?
I just didn't want to interrupt anybody. So the thing that we found most interesting, and I actually had forewarning from another Baroness, but she brought to my attention that you are not only the physical representation of the crown, you almost become the parents of the barony.
Oh yes.
And so you hear about every little squabble, every little, he touched me, she said something mean about me, he took my cheese, like you hear all the things. And I think that while it can be an overwhelmingly positive experience, you also have to go into it knowing what you're looking at, because in the same vein as being behind the scenes in court, sometimes it can take a little bit of the shine off of the way that you look at our game and the way that you participate in our society. So just be aware, you have amazing benefits. You get to know your populace, you get to encourage people, you get to watch them grow, and you also get to deal with spats.
Yeah, cheese theft is I don't know. Cheese theft could bring my world crumbling down to its foundation. I have to say.
Right.
We've dealt with a lot this term, but cheese theft
Well,
could throw me over
and
the
I
edge.
mean, the thing that always cracked me up is when people bring things, you know, you're like, okay, I'm happy to try and help. And then there's some things that people bring to you and you're like, what, how do you think I'm going to affect this? What do you want me to do with this? Did you just need an ear, or like, I'm not really sure where we're going here.
Well, I can tell you as someone, it took a while to finally have this stick. some of us still cling to the hope that there is someone who can like change people, not
Right.
not gesturing at His Excellency at all. No, no. And so sometimes people think that we have more power than we actually have over the hearts and minds of
Yes.
our beloved populace. Yeah, that is.
I'll quote Thegn Durin, who was Baron a couple of reigns after us, who said, when you're sitting on the phone and you say, "I'm sorry, I can't make your boyfriend love you again. And if someone is shooting out your porch light, you need to call the police."
Oh boy. Okay. I'm happy to say I never had to deal with those items.
I didn't either, but oh, Durin looked very weary. As
That's
he was
because they
saying.
waited till you were at work to call. There.
You won't hear from me. They're probably
So-
hey.
Do we have somebody who wants to offer advice for somebody who's thinking about the position or takes on this position?
I'll give you the advice I give all the people that ask me about it, and then I'll be quiet for a while so other people can talk. I told the guy who was coming after me, I said, "Look, it's like you're standing in the middle of a gigantic musical instrument, and it's like a stringed or a horn instrument, and the bits of it are a circle around you going away, and at the end of each of those strings or horns or whatever, there's a person or a faction, and you want to get a G chord out of that. And the way you get that is by tuning and stroking and verbally harassing and
Coddling.
coddling people and getting them all to sing together, right? Because you have no actual power. You have to convince people to do it. And ideally, you want to convince them all to want to sing the G chord, not try to coerce them into singing it. And this ultimately I found to be true even when I was prince, and it's probably true for the crown as well. There's only so much you can do by giving commands. People have to want to do this, because we're not really kings and princes and barons and knights. We're playing a game, which is a consensual game. It's a lot of fun, but if you tell me to do something I really can't do, I just walk away until the beginning of the next reign, right? That was the advice I gave him, is that you're more like trying to tune an instrument and then play it than you are like the conductor.
Yeah, and that can be a difficult, at least I've run into, it can be difficult sometimes to remember where I stop and my seneschal begins. Because sometimes you forget, because people will come to you with things and you're like, oh, I've got to take care of this. And it's not actually a thing that I'm supposed to be taking care of. It is my seneschal. And I think that's something that
I do take on more of the administrative stuff than I really should, and I should just leave it to my seneschal. But sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm the person who can smooth it over.
yeah, I see a hand.
Sorry, my hand. I'm not actually on the panel, but I can't shut up. So
Yes, you are. You are on the panel.
You are a coronet.
Please introduce yourself and join the panel.
sorry, Baroness, Viscountess, Magister Marian, Staarveld. Same dates as this guy here. My biggest piece of advice to anyone who takes this job, and I have to start by saying it is the best job in the SCA. I've done several jobs, and don't get me wrong, I loved being princess, but being baroness it's just amazing. Biggest piece of advice: pick one night a week that you are not the baron or baroness. Don't answer the phone. Don't go on social media. Don't answer your email. One night a week that you're not.
Just
It
take
makes
for
the
a
nights
break.
that you are better, and it makes you more sane.
Definitely. I saw Baroness Anna had raised her hand again.
Yeah, actually, she just took what I was also going to say. So yay, yeah, set office hours. It's okay to say, hey, I have my life and my family and my job that I need to also do. So these are the times I'm available. I'm happy to talk. Otherwise, please shoot me an email. You do not have to be there all the time.
Yeah, and that actually leads nicely into a conversation about boundaries and work-life balance.
Yeah, this panel was actually supposed to have another person on it, and that's Inghard from Aquaterra. And her grace decided that there was too much going on in her personal life, and her health was not good for it tonight. So she actually bowed out, and I applaud her for it, because I know myself sometimes I have a hard time knowing when I need to step back and worry about my real life obligations sometimes. And
Always. The way I would answer this, and what I've said, it doesn't matter if they're Baron or Baroness or King or Queen or whatever. You need to understand that you're in this position to serve the people, not them serve you. There are people that will do things for you, but when you're Baroness or Baron or whatever title you are,
Coronet.
when you're a coronet, sorry, Finn. You give a lot of yourself, and and that is your job. People do help you, but I always felt that I am there for them. They're not there for me. I mean, yes, they do help, but when you're on, you're on. When you go to an event, you have a responsibility to the people. You have a responsibility to nurture and grow your barony. And you do that not through power, you do that through example. And I applaud people that do that. It is really hard to watch somebody try to do it by being powerful. It squashes people. And it doesn't grow your barony. It makes people less likely to participate. So your goal has to be your barony. Your personal life goes on hold when you are a coronet. And an example is, after I stepped down, I was obviously an officer in our council, and somebody says, well, you don't come to fighters practice. I said, for 6 years, I came to fighters practices. I'm not a fighter, but I was there. And now my personal life, it takes precedence over that, because I'm no longer your Baroness. People actually got mad at me because I hadn't gone to a fighters practices. I'm like, I'm not a fighter. I have no desire to go on Tuesday night and get eaten by mosquitoes. I'm sorry. So they expect me to continue that even after, but that's the job of the next Baron and Baroness, to be there to support their people, to show them through example how wonderful this community is. So.
yeah, I think that is really important. We are an all volunteer organization. You don't want to abuse your volunteers, otherwise you. So,
Are you saying I should get rid of my bullwhip?
yeah.
Oh, my reign has just been compromised. Baron Finn.
So, Stjarna, I would totally agree, because given in the first, I think it was like 9 months that Faunus was with me, we tried really hard to be present and available when we could, to the point of trying to have a baronial phone. So we got a pay-as-you-go phone, so that it was not tied to either of our personal cell phones, and that we tried to reply to voicemails or whatever within a 24-hour period, yada yada, which then sort of quickly went away because everybody started using Facebook and then messaged us anyway, which was fine, because then I could just look at it and then take it in stride. When it was just me, I felt it was a higher obligation, because there was only one of me, to try to advocate and promote all of the different activities that were going on through the barony, whether it be revels. I tried to show, the only one I think I didn't show up to was like a archery practice, because it was on a weird day and I couldn't make it. But anyway, tried to really show up at all of those events. And I travel all over the place trying to represent the barony, to really advocate and show that it was about the people. And if I could be that conduit, then I was going to do that. And I signed up for this for those 3 years.
Mhm.
and that's what I signed up for. I'm wholeheartedly also with Anna in the cross the line of family time. This is my time, which was really hard, but it wasn't really a big issue because I was single more or less at that time. And then towards the end of it, Eduardo and I started dating, and he completely supported me on the back end when I needed to go somewhere on my own to be a part of the barony. So it's doable. It's just, what is your energy level and what are you willing to put into it? But it's really all about the people. It was never about me. It was always outward.
That's really cool, because that's my advice to people too when they try and do it is the first one is, you're not in power, so just be good to the people. Find out, I use the ship analogy, find out which way the wind's blowing and then sail the ship, in conjunction with that, and you'll be fine. And then I tell them, monitor your energy levels and make sure you don't burn out, because you're going to be there for a while. And I'm really an introvert who forces himself to be extroverted, and there are times where as Baron I just went into a room and shut the lights off and just sat there for like 15 minutes if I could get away with it, and then came back out with a plan or even just a little bit more energy enough to get through it. So I was like, yeah, but I mean, I wasn't alone. Like Finn, I didn't I mean, I had support, in the job of being Coronet. So I mean, I don't know what it would be like to be an individual and do it. I'd imagine it'd be tougher, but it sounds like as long as you're following, your advice or your Grace's advice and not being mean to the volunteers of the organization, I think we can get through it. Anyone can get through it. That's really cool.
I'll say that I'm a service junkie and that I love that sort of level of service. And so when I could provide that level of service to the people, it was like being an extrovert and feeding, that sounds horrible, feeding on that sort of positivity and that energy, but it's a reciprocation of feedback. Your populace will bend over backwards to do things for you if you show that you are genuine in the vision of what you're going for. Likewise, if you bend over backwards for them saying, I believe in you, you can totally do this, it becomes this, as Ambrose was talking about, this musical instrument that just flows, and it's amazing when everybody's in sync.
I totally agree. And I just found that as a crown, it was easier to put fire to it and keep it going. Whereas the Coronet, it was such a long period of time that I had to monitor my energy levels and kind of make sure I didn't burn out. I think that, in my experience, was what I learned, the difference between those two jobs. And, as a crown, I could just go full bore for 6 months or 8 months, or I guess this one's 1.5 years. But yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah, it's been an odd period in all of our lives.
Yes.
We did have a hand up.
Having done the job of Baroness and the job of Princess at the same time, and oddly, the two will argue with each other in my head. There is a real difference in the timing of how things work, and I think it definitely, one works better for some people and one works better for others. So as a Baron or Baroness, a lot of the time, the job, you know all of the people very, very closely and intimately. It's a smaller group. And so you can hopefully catch problems really early and kind of poke and step back. And then, nudge a little bit more and then step back. Whereas, never been queen, but I imagine the timing is very similar. When you're princess, a lot of the time you don't get that problem until it's in flame, and you have to fix it very, very quickly and with much larger movements and larger action. They look somewhat similar from the outside, I'm sure, to a lot of people, but it is very different in the scheduling of your reaction.
Quick, do it quick.
Yeah, so I was Coronet for I think 5 years and a couple of months, and then we went on to your crown, and then went into the onto your crown, just guns ablazing. I think we hit an event every weekend, and a couple of weekends we hit 2 events, like every weekend through the rain. And so when we had a castle in place, I think that's the right word, when we were in place in the barony while we were king and queen. And then when we came back, I was done. Like, I just took stock of where I was at, and I'm like, no, I'm finished. And we actually went back as Coronet to the barony, and I said, we're at the end anyway. It would have been the tail end of our 6th year. And I said, we're just I'm gonna quit a little early. And then they went in and did their vote. So for me, I was doing fine. I was okay. And then it was like, I tried to sprint at the end of a marathon. I just burned myself right out.
Yeah.
So I didn't quit the SCA, but I definitely had to throttle back. And that's, I think, what pointed to me the difference between those two jobs. It was pretty apparent that I was out of gas by the end of the reign as crown. So,
Well, you know, one of the things that I think this flows into, there is controversy within our kingdom about how long somebody should be Baron or a coronet. Some people really think that there should be a quick turnover. And I'm like, to me, when I was in my 5th year, everybody else was being switched out every 3 years. And they had no concept of the value of that longevity of being in the position. They thought that 6 years was way too long. But what I found is that first year, it's chaos. You're trying to figure out what you're doing. Second year, things start falling into place. Third year, the wheels are going. Fourth year, the years are going still. Fifth year, you're getting tired. And by 6th year, you're like, I'm so done. It's a good progression because you have a couple years where everything is going really well. There's a well-oiled machine happening. And if you change it out every 3 years, I know that there's reasons why people do it for 3 years. Finn, you are probably completely burnt out doing it on your own. I can understand that. And life changes. But having that 6 years, and I was like, I mean, Stjarna and I were like the old folks in the meeting. I believe we changed policy within the noble estates while we were there because we had been there so long and we're like, we're so done with what you guys are doing. Can we just do it this way? Just suggestions to the thing. But you really do learn a lot about your people and how to make things go smoothly and get those awards going and how to nurture people and bring things up. And then you are so ready to pass it on to the next person. And it's not upheaval, which even if you have the best people step in, there is always upheaval. They do everything differently. I mean, I don't know if you guys did sergeantry, but I did it very differently than the people before me and the people after me. And they kept asking, the people after me kept asking me to do it my way. And I'm like, no, I'm stepping back. It's your turn. And so there has to be that upheaval. But every 3 years having upheaval, it can be hard on a group because nobody knows quite what to do.
Go ahead. I see a hand up. Go ahead. Yeah, just start in.
Okay. One of the things, unfortunately, with the law changes that Antir put in as far as how the turnovers go, how often they go, one of the things that Adiantum lost that was very valuable is because we had that yearly sort of vote of confidence, and we were a lot more open, I think, with each other about whether we were happy or not. We had a pattern where we would have castellans for a year before they stepped up so that they had a training period. And didn't necessarily mean that they were going to do everything the way that the previous set had done. And in fact, often it was very, very different by the time they actually took the position. But it gave them a little bit of breathing room to find out really how much work is this and how much support they were going to need and who they would put in those personal support positions. Like, you're going to need somebody to cook for you at Eggles if you're the Baron and Baroness of Adiantum, just trust me. You know, you're not going to be cooking for yourself. Just those really basic things where having that year to get everything in place and practice and learn the rules and get to know the people better, get comfortable talking to the crown where that may not be something that you've done before and now it's your job. I think we have suffered that loss.
I think we lost a source of institutional memory as well.
Yeah,
That when you flip the barony, when you flip the coronet every 3 years. Okay, first a couple things. It was explained to me by a particular king that we needed to flip each barony every 3 years because it was too difficult when you had too many baronies all changing at the same time. Of course, flipping every barony every 3 years means a third of the baronies change every year. So that kind of backfired. They didn't, the people who put this idea in did not get what they wanted or what they said they wanted, which was not to suddenly have to deal with 3 or 4 baronies at once. Well,
There's too many baronies. now
there's
for
too
that.
many baronies at this point for that to happen. If you're flipping every one of them well, at that time, Avical was still in on tier. So if you're flipping every barony every 3 years, then you're going to get a fair number every year. But what I was thinking about besides that is that institutional memory, the old barons and baronesses at council make a difference. If for no other reason, then they can say, excuse me, we tried that once. It was a disaster. Let's not go that way again. Or when everyone is flummoxed, the old baron and baroness in council can say, you know, we had something like this happen. And this is how this is the things we tried that didn't work, and this is what did.
Mhm.
So one thing that tends to happen, I think, with a three-year turnover is that there's a certain amount of the old baron and baronesses go away. We had some controversy at the time of ours, so you know,
Little
we
bit.
just a little bit. So when we stepped down, I just announced to all and sundry, I'll see you at fighter practice. Otherwise, forget me. I'm not going to be there. And I spent it for a year. I said a year and a day because that's traditional, right? For a year and a day, I'll go to fighter practice, and I'm not going to anything else except bagels. And
Between you guys and Stjarna, there's so much to dissect there. I mean, burnout's a real thing. I mean,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep. So
To be really clear, it was not the job that burned us out. It was the process of our step down and how
Yeah.
that went.
I
But
was, I was pissed off. Just put it
And
that
that
way.
so
I want to hear
I-
Finn. I really want to hear what Finn has to say.
I'm just curious. So, and I say this coming from being from a younger barony. I wonder what the perspective of those that are in long time baronies that have had those long stretches of people that have been, 15, 10 plus years, whatever, as the coronets, and then those that have, like Stjarna, like yourself, gone for the 6 years, versus new baronies. So Raffensfava, who were before me, only did the 3. I did the 3. Anna and Jose after me did the 3. And so I'm curious as to what the perspective of being a younger barony and the stint of 3 years versus a longer 6-year term, and how that sort of compares. Because if you've got a well-established barony, I wonder if that matters in your ability to go the distance, quote unquote, the 6 years with ease as compared to all of this sort of growing pains of still being a new barony.
I don't even know how long Ulfheathen and Baron and Regenleaf were Baron and Baroness. I really don't know.
Long time.
It was a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
Barony of Wastekeep had traditions, like 20 years of traditions built up. We weren't making them. Your barony was making tradition. And I think that has a lot to say about it. The older baronies, it is much harder to change things. Not to say that we don't, but a new person coming in has ideas about changing our barony, and we go, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, people that say, let's have a weekly meeting, that is never going to work in Wastekeep.
Oh yeah.
We're just not going to do it,
so
And the
I
younger
agree.
people are energetic.
But
I'm sorry.
I know I've inherited a lot of traditions in Terra Pomaria, and some of them are great, and I love them. But some of them don't make sense anymore, and people have forgotten the meaning of the tradition. And the people who are complaining most about that, whatever specific tradition, aren't really playing anymore. So,
Exactly.
sometimes you have to decide when you need to hang on to it and when you need to let it go. But it's very important to understand why each of those traditions are there. I mean, if you're ignoring the traditions of the people who came before you, you're really not doing a very good job.
and it can be very problematic. It looks like Baroness Anna has her hand raised again.
So, a couple things real quick. I apologize. I agree with Finn. I also think that the actual physical location of your barony will vary how things go as far as your term. If you are in a area that has a lot of baronies clumped together, you're going to struggle with the fact, for example, in the Portland area, there are 3 baronies that are right next to each other. And you have sets of people in each barony that play on all 3. And so sometimes you would think that that would increase your resources for manpower, but unfortunately, sometimes that actually reduces them because they are stretched across all 3.
Right.
With regards to the changeovers, my issue is less the term lengths and more the amount of time that we as a kingdom are allowing for changeovers. So specifically, what I'm seeing is a lot of baronies, and I apologize, I'm also the polling deputy at this point, so I'm coming at it from both sides. What I'm seeing is there are a lot of baronies that are coming into their coronet status, and either their predecessors are burnt out and have disappeared, or they've got these huge new ideas, which is cool, except in both cases, everybody's reinventing the wheel. And we don't have a lot of overlap time between the incoming and outgoing coronets to be able to do those things, to be able to be an intern, to take notes, to see how things go. And so what I'm actually pushing for is less about the term limits and more about, okay, instead of saying, hey, congratulations, you've been picked as the next coronets, you're going to step up in 2 weeks. I want to say, hey, congratulations, you've been picked as the next coronets. You have 6 months. Work with your current coronets, work with your current herald, work with your current seneschal. Make sure everything's copacetic, then put the hat on.
I think one of the issues on tier is you have everything that's supposed to take place under one reign. So, unless they change the law, I think it makes it difficult because, the king that you start your polling under is the one who's going to best.
I'm not sure if that is a law or a custom. Your Grace, well, one of the Graces on the call, could either of you speak to that?
I never limited them as to step up. I will talk to, when I first stepped up as a queen, I still had the coronet for my barony. And because our only event was Baron's Ball, which is in October, I stepped up in July. I was still the Baroness and actually went to that event, put the coronet on, and then took it off, put the crown on, and put it on the next person. But I did. This is the most important thing. Eric and Rufino were before us. They made the decision for my barony. I did not. I pushed it for that purpose, but it did not have to be in the same reign. There are some crowns that insist upon it, and that is their prerogative. And that's all I can say. It truly is dependent on who is there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's what your plan would rely on, is that one crown would make a decision and the next crown would uphold it. So you might not get 6 months, but you could probably swing 3, or maybe even 4 to keep it within that reign. I think that's something you bump up against. Is we seem a little bit leery in the SCA of a crown, like laying things on the lap of another crown. I know I didn't like to do it when I was a crown. I'd put a squire on vigil and then see you later, and then the next king crown would have to do that to knight that person, and I was leery of doing that. I went and talked with the cornets, and said, hey, are you okay with this plan? This is what I want to do. And if they weren't like, oh yeah, heck, we want to do it too, we love this person for this period or whatever it was, it would be a problem. So I think you could have that conversation, but I think to say, we're going to put in place, let's say, a law that's 6 months, before you assume the mantle of the coronets of a barony, you might have a problem pushing that one. I think it's a good idea. Personally, I really do. And I've never shoved anything on anyone as a crown. So I could see it working, but
Yeah, I think
The only problem is that every crown can change the decision.
yeah, that's true.
That is the fear. A
Mhm.
crown chooses somebody and the next crown literally can change it.
Which,
And that's
which would be stupid. I would like to say that as a crown. That would
Yes.
be really stupid. And
I
really
appreciate
arrogant,
that. Thank you. Thank you,
right?
Vic.
So
it's a higher
For the
level
record.
conversation that we get to do.
That would
this is
totally
being recorded,
destroy
right?
her.
Okay, good.
Remember, there's a lot of personalities in the SCA though, and they're not all nice. I
Yeah.
mean, I hate to say it.
Thanks. That is actually a point I hadn't really contemplated. So yeah.
Viscountess, if you ever have anything to say, you don't have to raise your hand. Just find a good place to insert.
Because of the version of Zoom we're on, I don't have the hand raise option. So once again, not naming names, but I will tell you that keeping it, having the decision changed does not necessarily mean it's a new crown. The crown that makes the decision can then change their minds. So,
Yeah.
and then
But I-
move on with the
I-
conversation.
Well, and Marian and I stepped down straddled rings. So one crown chose our successors, and the next crown went along with that. And because that incoming crown was not able to come so far south at the time, our successors were installed by the Prince and Princess of the Summits with a writ from the king,
Cool.
which
Yeah.
was an interesting variation on the usual way things happen.
That's really
It's
cool.
actually kind of cool, though.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of cool to hold up the writ, and say,
It was cool.
I'm allowed to do
That,
this.
that part was cool.
That part was cool.
The crown that changed its mind was not cool, but
I think from the crown perspective, one thing that I'd just like to stick in really quick, and I'm not sure if your Grace, if you experienced it or not, but I know for me that I like the longevity of the Barons and Baronesses. They were a different sort of, let's just call it a voice, because the only other longevity I have in the kingdom are my officers. And there's a difference between, say, the kingdom seneschal and a baron and baroness or a baronial seneschal. And so I really like having one, or I don't think I've ever experienced with one, sorry, Finn, so I'm just going to say individuals, plural, where I could go to them and say, like, what's happening in your area? What are you dealing with? What have you experienced? How are you changing things up? What's your plan for the future? Because that's their thought process. And I really like that. I found it quite different from the officer perspective in most cases, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I would like, as a crown, to see barons and baronesses coronets changing yearly or even every 2 years. I think 3 for me was perfect, and I loved it when they stretched it to 6, because I'd see the same people if I was lucky enough to win crown again in a 6-year period. So for me, I enjoyed that part of it, and I enjoyed their perspective of longevity within the area that they were ruling or overseeing. So I like that a lot.
My wife and I, we've had many discussions. 3 years seems too short, but 6 years right now seems like a whole lot. Especially, I mean, pandemic time is completely different than normal time. But when we were going to events, I mean, we're going to 3-4 events a month. And it's really hard to sustain that. And just the financial costs of that, I mean, it really adds up, especially over
on
a
tier
2-year period.
Yeah, cornets and on tier have a completely different road to travel than cornets in the kingdom of Avical now. When you were a cornet in Avical, when it was a part of on tier, it was the same thing. So we've changed the kind of the model, let's call it, of our cornets. I think it's just I would say it's a little bit easier. They're gonna all slap me when we're done if they hear it, but I would say it's a little easier because there's way less travel and there's less kingdom now for us. So it's a little bit I feel easier to get it. come to grips with. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
The on-tier cornets have a lot to do and a much, like a very difficult job.
One thing.
Point of
I
reference.
mean, one thing where you are a representative of a local group, and so you're a local group, local barony officer wearing that coronet, but you're also a kingdom representative, and you're expected to be at every principality event and every crown event. I mean, whether or not you do or not, it's kind of an expectation that you do. So I mean, the load of work it's a lot.
Baron Finn, you had a point.
So I recorded the number of events that I went in the 3 years and how many miles. And this was like a rough figure because I forgot probably a couple. 72 events and over 11,000 miles.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But
Like,
in all fairness, you had some weird goal where you were going to go to every single one. I'm sorry.
I may have tried to uphold the baronial connections that Rep and Svava had.
That being said, principalities have those principality events. We're in the inlands. It's not the same. We don't have principality tournament, that principality, but we have the inlands. And so in some ways we have that same rush where sometimes we're trying to support the 3 main baronies, maybe 4 or 5 other groups. We don't have the 3 mountains situation where they are so close, they almost don't have an excuse not to go to everybody's event. Ours are a little bit farther apart. I mean, 2.5 hours is an easy jaunt for us to go to an event, whereas 3 mountains, dragons is 45 minutes, they can go to another event. Jealous, totally jealous. By the way.
Although the downside to that is there are 800,000 events every summer in the Portland, Vancouver area.
And to
So
me, they should
and
be
down here.
choosing which ones they're going to. Their personal events take priority.
Oh, for sure.
mhm.
And we usually said minimum of 2 events a month. 2 events was our thing because we still have to work. We still have to do other things
Mhm.
Yeah.
and be sane. Sanity.
Oh, is that a requirement?
So when we stepped up as Baron and Baroness of Adiantum, let's say Terra Pomaria was a brand new baby shire and was not in the summits yet. But we were the only people who could open a court from Salem down to California. We didn't even have any dukes and duchesses living in this area at the time. We traveled a lot. I
Yeah,
have no
we
idea how many
we
thousands.
went through that in Avical, where our like
Yeah.
barons and baronesses in the 80s and the 90s were like our prince and princesses. They were a representative of the crown. They were the ones that held courts. We rarely saw the crown, and then we went through that. And then when we developed into a principality, like a crown principality, we got to see a lot more of the royalty as kind of the SCA grew. I'll say it. But
Yeah.
and then once we were our own principality, then the role of the barons and baronesses, the cornets, it changed a lot. I feel, and I had discussions with the people that had done it, when we were a part of Ontier, and then afterwards too, and they said, yeah, no, it's a completely different game. Our focus was on our prince and princess, our cornets, not on the baronial cornets, and so a little bit of a different game. And some people took it really hard, I would say. They wanted to be important, and all of a sudden they weren't, and then it slowly morphed again, and now we're as a kingdom. I feel that the role of the barons and baronesses, the baronial cornets, has increased again a little bit more. I lean on them quite a bit. So
I think we
that's
were
just my
lucky
experience.
in that we, the 2 of us having held the position for a little over 7 years, we bridged that gap. So we stepped up before it was a principality. We were a huge part of the push to become a principality. So we weren't going to resent the fact that it was happening because we were fighting for it. So by the time we had successors, it was a done deal and they didn't have to experience that difference.
I wanted to acknowledge there's been some stuff going on in the chat, and since that's not actually going to show up in our video, there's been some conversation about the fact that for being a historical recreation society, we're not always the best at recording our own history. That does seem to be, there was a comment there, that does seem to be improving thanks to COVID. A lot more of this is online. We have a lot more oral histories being shared. The sisters interviews, a lot of the interviews and things like that are making it so we're able to more easily access the history without having to go directly to the person to be like, so 72 years ago. And the other thing is I've seen it looks like the accord has been reached in the chat that 5 years is about the right length of time for a baronial reign. So I just wanted to make sure that that was included in our conversation.
And if by accord you mean Vic and I.
Yes.
Right. That's all we need, just the two
I
of
only
you.
need
Yeah.
it like 5.
Okay.
So yeah.
No, and I have to say, as someone who's we're closing in on our 3rd year, 5 years does sound like it would be a nice natural endpoint to reach, but COVID has definitely changed everything.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So,
just counting.
In all fairness, at 5 years is when you tell the crown, hey, we need to be changing this out.
Yeah.
And so it does, if Anna, if you start that conversation at 5 years, then they schedule the polling in a couple, 3 or 4 months. Then the polling happens, and then by the time you hit that 6 years, they now know what they're doing. It all actually works out to 6 years. This last year is just sort of, nah, you know.
So we, yeah, we were talking about that tribal knowledge and about not reinventing the wheel. And I had thrown a link in the chat, and I wanted to give a little bit of context to it. I realize it will not be available in the recording, so if anybody wants to message me, I can send them the link. It is a link to a Google document that I created as the polling deputy that is basically a document that says, congratulations, you've been chosen as a coronet. Now what? And it sort of addresses all of these things, you know, what do you need to think about before you step up? What do you need to think about directly after you step up? And, you know, what are the things that you need to talk to people about that you may not necessarily think about the moment that they put the hat on your head? So if anybody is thinking about putting their name in for a coronet position, or even a prince or princess tournament, this would be a document that might be worth your time to scan through. And if you have any questions, or if you want to contribute more or different information, please let me know. It's a living document, and I would love to be able to make it as useful as possible.
Excellent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I can second that. I've read it.
Thank you, Finn. I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, so speaking of the longevity of these roles, most of us enter as how do I say this? A lot of us go in with our spouses or our partners. Our predecessors went in, they were not a couple, and they had partners. And it can take a bit of a toll on a relationship. I know this might not be a question that everyone wants to get in on. Can we talk a little bit about that? How do we balance that? I'm also going to go balance my child while you guys discuss. Have fun.
I'm going to start before Finn, because I had this conversation with him. I said very clearly, you guys are very young in your relationship. Are you going to be able to handle this stress if you're not together? And they said, oh, sure, yes, we can do that. Finn, go.
I was waiting for this question.
She just chucked you.
I know.
My exact words. Those were my exact words to him.
Yeah. And I can actually say from the bottom of my heart that I knew that no matter what, that I would continue on. That regardless, because multiple people actually asked us that same question when we were in the polling, are you ready phase? Do you want to actually do this? And a lot of people in the barony knew who I was and didn't inherently know who Faunus was. And they're like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, well, he's been in the SCA for a little while. I've been in the SCA for a while. We'll figure it out. And inherently, I think in the dynamic of our relationship, it was just a generic parting of ways, which was very good. And I won't go into super details, but it worked out because I told the barony, like, no matter what, I have your back. Like, I will figure this out. And whoever the crown may be at the time, because it passed on to Havric and Mary Grace after you guys. And so she and I had some strong conversations about, like, what is actually going to happen when this actually dissolves. And I said, I'm in it if the barony is going to want me there. And so when they did the confidence polling, they're like, yeah, I think we can figure out with Finn and figure it out and move on. And we did. And I don't regret it, actually, at all. Was it hard? Heck yeah. But I knew that no matter what, I had the barony behind my back, and Anna more specifically being one of my head of retinues, just somebody that I could turn to and just say, oh my God, I'm going crazy, like, help me off my rocker, helped. And then,
You were not going crazy.
well, boy, did I feel it.
You
Yeah.
were
I-
amazing. By yourself, you were amazing. Your barony came up around you, and it was an amazing thing to watch. So I applaud you.
I'm incredibly humbled, and as hard as it was to go through as an individual, I am humbled by the barony every time. Everybody has their own sort of growing pains within their group, but everybody rallied, right? And when I talk about a group of people who are perhaps misfits or don't necessarily fit in, everybody started playing their own musical instrument, and we made it work. And I cannot also say that, like, I couldn't have done it without Eduardo in our dating process to sort of say, as a longtime lion of Vontier, to lean on and just say, I need your help. I'm going to go to all of these things, and I'm going to try to be up there solo, and you're not up there with me, but you're with me. And that helped. And to really realize that, like, when you know that you have the barony behind you, it makes a huge difference. And I can't imagine, like, what your and Steercar's sort of thought process was when you sat us down at that July coronation. I think it was May Crown when I was running the event. You sat us down and you're like, okay, like, what's happening? Like, are you going to continue on? Like, how's this going to work out? And I knew that I was in it for the long haul. And I would say things played out the way that they intended to play out. So that was good. I don't want to speak ill, but I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did.
So if poor Finn, he had the pleasure of also being the first coronet. to
Yeah.
have-
Same sex and on tier.
And that was a huge risk. I mean, Steercar and I went, yes, we're going to do this. So we took a lot of risk. First of all, choosing them because we didn't know how Ontier was going to react. And then, the separation of the two, and then Finn taking it out, he proved that it's okay. And I really applauded him for that. I mean, I've seen some married couples implode being coronets. So I knew that it didn't matter if there were two men, two women, or what. It can happen with anybody. But I think he handled it with grace, and I was there for him. There.
Yeah, and it's important to note too that the stress can happen not only between coronets who are a couple, but separate coronets who, with their own partners, because there can be some of that tension where I'm the coronet, but my partner doesn't understand or doesn't get the same recognition as I do.
I was very dear friends with the coronets that came before us, and they weren't together, and I know the stress level that they went through individually as couples, and
Yeah.
It was just as stressful.
Ours has been nothing but glitter and happiness
Always.
the entire time.
That's what we all say. That's really what we all say.
No, we try to be open about the fact that, there are days where,
Oh yeah.
where we wish we were going to separate events. Oh boy, howdy do we. But
That is something I feel grateful for, the relationship I have with my wife. She can go to an event in another state, another country,
yeah.
and I'm totally fine with it. We have a good trust and communication.
So don't post the pictures.
That-
No, no.
If anybody else cares to join in, you're more than welcome to.
Because otherwise I'll start extolling his virtues, and then
I
where will we
feel this
be?
is a very important topic for anybody considering this,
Mhm.
because it is and can be a big stress of the relationship. And not every baronial couple comes out of it.
It's like incredible pressure can create a diamond, or it can create dust.
Yeah.
If there are already fractures there,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be dust.
I would say if you have any questions about your relationship, I would encourage you to solve those before you consider putting yourself.
Yeah, I strong armed him into marriage before I consented to running as his Baronial Coronet partner.
We went to separate events frequently during our tenure, though, just because since we were the only representatives down here, there would be, a fighting practice over there and an arts practice over here or something like that. So we actually spent a great deal of our 7 years at different events. And that worked out fine for us. But I think one of the things that we should, as people who are currently or have been barons and baronesses in the past, should communicate to people is both the joy and the stress, because going into this job not realizing that it is a full-time 60-hour-a-week commitment, it sort of sets people up for failure. But then also, you don't want to only tell them the bad things, because that's not the majority of the job. The majority is amazing and probably the best thing I ever did with my life. On the other hand, there are those Tuesday night calls at 3 a.m. where you're like, why are you telling me about your next door neighbor's sex life? And do you want tickets or what?
And you can't have one without the other. It doesn't exist that way. I
exactly.
tell people that all the time.
Exactly.
Like, we know the job's stressful, like duh. And I tell people, just go for it. Like, the ship's not gonna sink. And oh no, you were the Coronets for a year and then things went sideways and you had to step down. So what? Who cares? Like, I mean, a lot of times I feel like the huge amounts of stress that we bring to ourselves, right? And
We do.
and like we just need to relax. And it's, I mean, I don't want to say it and make it sound insignificant. It's fun, right? It's the SCA should be fun. That's the number one thing. And I tell people all the time, if you're thinking about considering a coronet, it's going to be great. It's going to be great amount of fun for you. You're going to go to these events. You're going to do all these things. Yes, it'll be stressful, but look at the world you're walking into, right? You're past being a new person standing on the sideline, getting called up in a court. Now you are in court, right? Make some cool garb, have some fun with it. Do what you want to do. Declare war on every other barony, even the ones that are like 40 hours away from you, and have a good time.
What?
Yeah.
So
But
the other thing that I wanted to bring up that we haven't really talked about is, yes, you get incredible support from your barony, but one of the things that I never expected and I walked away with is I made a ridiculous number of friendships amongst the other coronets.
Yes.
And we are so supportive as a community for each other, and being able to reach out and say, okay, I have this real hinky situation. What would you do here? And you develop these really tight kinships. And
Yes.
I love being able to walk up to those people at events and be like, cousin, yay!
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
right? And I mean, that's like 40 other people. right? Are we
Who-
up to 20?
Who kind of
Barony?
understand you. That's 40 other people
Yeah.
trying to get where you're coming from, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
So
Family.
12 when we
Yeah, I
stopped
saw
her?
12 or 13. I think 14 at 30th year.
Yeah, that word cousin becomes a lot more meaningful when you take on the baronial coronet.
It does.
Yes.
It does.
and
And it's such a
just-
resource.
yeah, and I mean discussions like these that happen in person and online, and you know, there's an entire Facebook group that's just B&Bs and their majesties, and it's really nice to be able to grow those friendships through like experiences. So
Yeah.
I want to put a plug in for that.
Well, and let's face it, the women's bathroom at 12th night turns into the best support group ever. You ever had that happen where you get to the window or they get to the mirrors, you know, everybody's coming out, they're washing their hands, you look around and you're like, okay, we're all wearing baronial hats. And then the conversation starts. Those can be the best conversations.
All right, I've had a lot of questions. It's like talking about all the work. That is, anybody want to share like a moment where they really felt like that coronet belonged on your head?
Oh, so many.
I think the
I'm too
things
tired to even think about this.
you need to remember that the positive, probably the biggest honor in the world is to be that person that gets to call that person up into court and to share with everybody how amazing that person is. And here's the difference between being a coronet and being a king and queen. You don't know everybody when you're king and queen. You are given things and you're told a few things about them, but you might not necessarily know the person. But as a coronet, you know that person.
Yes.
You can tell everybody how amazing this person is, and you get to share that moment with them. I don't care if it's something from the crown coming through you sometimes, or if it's one of your baronial awards, but you get to be the person that shares that with the world and gives them their moment in the spotlight, and probably is the make or break moment of them staying with the SCA, because they need that to feel as part of our group, and telling people about that is probably the best moment ever.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's particularly effective on newcomers. Some of the people that I've gotten to watch blossom, who were brand new, and that very first time they got an award, it was like hook, line, and sinker. There it is. Bam.
And you're always a coronet to them now. Like even
Yeah,
if you
and it's
step
that
down
life
and they
bond.
never made you, they never made
Yeah.
you a court, those people would come up to you and call you your excellency. It's an interesting thing. But
It is.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, Vic. You were on the throne when I was a newbie, and you've always been that person for me. So there you go. Good job.
I know, yeah, it's hilarious. That's a pretty heavy burden when you really think about it. So I found it.
Right.
Yeah.
Say it.
I don't like to interrupt, so I can wholeheartedly agree with Vic. Like when people call you, like you are their coronets, right? And like you're there first, right? So it doesn't really matter for perpetuity. You are the one for them. The other thing for me was like I constantly cried in court because I was so happy and emotional to be able to be this conduit to give them this award of recognition that they wholeheartedly deserved, and to be able to say, this is our moment. Like the world just stops and like everything just is right here in this moment. I'm looking at them, the herald is talking to them, and I get to hand them this award, and I'm like bawling because it's like so happy to like finally award somebody this thing, which maybe one day when I'm the king, like I'll probably do that too. But like it's just so personal. It was as though like that moment was just the thing. And I have those moments when I look back with like Thorn and Dagrun, and just like having that moment, like I was so excited to be able to give that to other people. Yeah. I don't know, just it's amazing. I cried all the time.
That being said, unfortunately, I also am known far and wide within my barony of saying things wrong in court. I'm going to in because everybody will remember this and go, oh my gosh. And then it won't be as embarrassing when they do it. We have an award for the best death on the field. And I have a special gift, as I say with words. And I said, Sir Aaron, people have known you for your best deaths now know you for your best death on the field, but now they will know you for your large cup. Because the award I had for him was a very large cup. And my entire journey will never let me live that down, because I have to say, just go with it. If you have those moments, they're going to happen and they become history.
I mean, yes, gloriously history.
The few things that get written down are those moments.
Oh goodness, I have to say, I did public speaking. I was in Toastmasters for several years, and that was one of the gifts that I brought over from public speaking. Is if you flub it,
Own it.
well, yeah, don't look shamefaced and go. Did you? Wow. Okay, here's your cup.
I got the entire crowd going, really? And I'm like, oh my God.
That is very impressive, Your Grace. I have
Yes, Your Majesty, how kind of you to notice.
That
So when
being said, as after that time, I chose different ways of giving people prizes that were large cups. I never said that again because it was really not okay.
But it was hilarious. So and I think it is also useful for people to see us, you know, occasionally slip up and do things, because we are human, and it's okay to be human in the SCA and to not always be perfect. I'm super good at making my barony feel like it is safe to be a goofball at all times. So
just be a royal goofball.
Thank you, Baron.
When we stepped up as the cornets, I remember, so I'd never done that job before, and I remember thinking it's going to be different. I know it's going to be different. I'm just not sure how. And I think I don't think I was particularly rammy as Prince, but I think people knew what they were getting into. But so I was asking people about things, and one of the kind of mutterings I've heard was that people expected that we as the cornets were going to push our agenda, right? That we were going to, you know, listen to our friends, and our friends were going to get all these cool things, and you know, the average person in the barony wasn't getting anything because they weren't a part of our group. And I remember, so we were in a business meeting, which and we were asking people, you know, what do you think about this idea? And someone stood up to speak, and they were, you know, in the barony at that time, they were like the longest winded human being on the planet, and they sometimes didn't make sense when they spoke. Like they were usually like a half topic off, so they were connected, but it was going to go in a weird direction, and it was going to be awkward. Nobody liked listening to them talk, so they stood up to speak, and I think they got like maybe 7 seconds of speech out, and my squire at the time stood up and kind of spoke over her and was like, you need to shut up and sit down, and like, you know, this isn't important. And I was like, whoa, no, you need, like, I just stood up. I was like, no, you need to shut up and sit down. Like, everyone gets their say. You need to let this person speak. And then if I want to, I'll let you speak. But for right now, sit down. And I think that's exactly how it came out. And there was silence. And then the person that was talking went right back into her spiel, got it done, and sat down. And I remember thinking afterwards, I hadn't really thought about it at the time, but I remember like 5-6 months later, somebody bringing that up as like a pivotal moment for them. And they said, and a lot of the people that they hung out with, where they realized like, that's not what we're here to do as cornets. We're here to help the entire group. We're here to listen to everyone speak. And I never thought of it at the time, how it would play out or anything. I was just like, no one gets to talk over another person unless it's me in my head. And but yeah, it's funny how that little thing that I did kind of changed the course of where we were headed, and I think it kind of brought the group together a little bit, if I may say so. And I think we did really well after that as a barony. And I was surprised by that moment. For me, that was the one key point that I remember out of the entire experience.
I don't know how many people that are about ready to step up into the coronet position that I have actually said, you may be part of a very strong household, but if you take this coronet, you are no longer that household. You are the barony, and you cannot favor your household over your barony. And I have had people fail at that, and it's been hard to watch. And a barony suffers when that happens. You have, as Baron, Baroness, a coronet in general, you are the barony. You are not the person you were beforehand. You don't get to be you. You have to be the coronet. And it has to show in the community that you build. You can go back to your household later. They can be your best friends. But I mean, I had to make the decision of camping with my husband and his squires, which we'd always done, and camping with my barony. And I had to make that decision. And it was a hard one because, I mean, yes, squires could be close by, but they couldn't be front and center as they had been before I stepped up. You know, we had to make that distinction as the coronet. So.
That is difficult. I have seen somebody step up to a coronet, and while they're wearing it, the people from their household did like amazing things. They stepped up at scribal, they stepped up heraldry, and they were doing all these things, and they got a lot of awards. And I know how it was received. Even that is very difficult because I know the outside view. But then I also, while wearing a coronet, I see the inside view and where I realize what those people are doing to earn those rewards. So I think it's a very difficult balancing act because, I mean, your household should be stepping up to help you out, theoretically. But yeah, and then when everybody else sees them getting awards, it can be kind of difficult.
Yeah, we were semi-fortunate in that, we are allow me to put my foot in my mouth. We do not have an established household that we are part of. And it has allowed us the opportunity to do things like we have Clovis's colossal canvas castle, which is a massive day shade, which are with our sleeping and kitchen tents attached sometimes. But that's given us the opportunity to have a space for our barony. And it is kind of funny. We've developed, it's not a household, but there are definitely people who camp with the barony every time. And so they have kind of become our household in a way. Like those are the people we know what that person's going to help with, what that person's going to do. You know, this person's going to, I have these guys are going to wind up being my retinue. And it's an interesting walk, and a bit of a tightrope at times, because you do want to be careful to not appear to favor any group of people more than another. And I don't think any of us intentionally do. We really do love to give the awards to all of the people, but again, we're human, and sometimes we can slip into our rut without realizing what we've done. But it is a lot of fun to get to recognize people from all parts of our SCA lives.
Yeah, back to my question. I would say, for me, one of the times that I felt most like a baron was is at Ontier West War. We had a passel of children camp with us, and so the children in our barony are called the Assassins Guild, and in our enormous tent, I've got a really nice kitchen, and I baked some cookies, and I had one of the kids write a note, and we put it underneath the cookies and gave it to the Queen of the West. And she was, oh, thank you for the cookies. I will eat one. Do I have to take the whole tray? I'm like, yes. And so she went off, had her retainer handing out the cookies to everybody, and she got to the bottom of the tray and pulled out the note, and it said, from Thegn, Clovis and the Assassins Guild, we really appreciate you, or something to that effect. And so she yelled out, I've been assassinated, you're all dead. And it was those kids, you know, they still talk about that. And the Queen of the West at the time, who's now a countess, she's still, every year that passes, she like shares the memory and says, one of the best moments of being queen.
Aw.
And something else that happened at the same time, the young lady who wrote the note for us was worried about her handwriting. We didn't know this. His Excellency is, may I tell you? His Excellency is dyslexic, and he shared that while she was writing the note because she was really worried that she wasn't going to do it correctly. And he shared with her that he also has problems with, you know, letters sometimes and getting things the way that he wants. And it was 6 months ago, we were talking, I was talking with them, and her mother said, well, you know, it made such a big impression on her that that Thegn Clovis told her that, you know, he has the same problem, and it's really helped her be okay with, you know, the scribal work that she does.
But yeah, I think creating those moments as, you know, what makes it all worthwhile.
Anything else I want to say?
Sorry,
Bring it
I
up
just got
soon.
handed the computer.
They bring it up soon because I'm getting really crispy.
I think it would be fair to say that the greatest joy in being a baron or baroness is bringing joy. You know,
Yeah.
however that happens.
Yeah, children can be particularly fun in
They
the
can.
barony.
Yeah.
Have we discussed being parents in the baron or
Oh,
as
yeah.
a coronet yet?
Um,
Because I'm
Mm.
about to go end the joy of our child in a minute.
yeah. Let her stomp on the wall. It's okay. I don't think
Okay. All right. Any rumblings you hear in the background? The child is showering for 45 minutes now, and has decided to play the drums while she's in there. I'm not sure what's going on.
So I know Stjarna, and as well as us. Does anybody else have children while trying to be coronets at the same time?
Me, I have 2 small and 1 college.
All right. Would Anna, would you care to share about your experiences trying to have children and be an effective coronet at the same time?
So, just like being a coronet, it has its ups and its downs. The first thing I would like to say is if you are considering being a coronet and you do have short people, young short people, please understand that your retinue is not a babysitter. You need to make the appropriate arrangements for your children. And sometimes that means leaving them with grandparents or friends or family or whatever, and not taking them to an event at all. And sometimes that means taking them to an event, but having maybe an older sibling, bless our eldest child,
Are you done?
you know, be the shepherd of those children while you are at an event. And you have to just kind of be cool with the fact that sometimes your 6-year-old is going to come climb in your lap in the middle of court.
Yes.
It makes for
really
really
quickly,
good photos.
I'm going to interrupt really quickly. Sir Ambrose and Baroness Marian are turning in for the evening, and I would just like to say thank you very much for joining us. We've appreciated your attending with us this evening.
Thank you for having this. This has been wonderful.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Have a good rest of your
Good
evening.
Thanks.
All right, I'm sorry, Anna.
No, that's totally fine. The other thing that I would say though is be aware that when you have your coronet on, everything you do is reflection on not just the barony, but also the kingdom. And I am 100% guilty of yelling across an encampment at my son because he was throwing something sharp at someone or something silly, you know, as 6-year-old boys do. And later someone came up to me and said, maybe don't do that with your hat on. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even remember I had the hat on. Thank you, you know? So sometimes as a parent, you get very tunnel visiony and you just where you are and whether or not you have a hat on when you are dealing with your kids. But also my kids really enjoyed participating in things like our court, and it allowed us to really bond with the other younger populace in our barony. And again, it makes for some ridiculously cute photos sometimes if you can really get in good with your younger populace. So yeah, ups and downs.
I had a 2-year-old going up through, I don't know, 5th, 6th grade. So I had 4 kids, and I had to learn very quickly that my older children were not the babysitter of my children. I had to realize that I was the mom, and if somebody had to sit in camp, it had to be me. At a kingdom level event, my job was to be a mom unless I went to baronial estates. At my local event, that was very different. That is where I had to have somebody watching them, and I had people that would help me. I did at kingdom level events, if I wanted to be present and not be in my encampment, I brought along a babysitter and paid them to watch my kids. Because I also know that my older children did not want to come to an event just to watch their brothers. So there's this give and take. I have been known to forget about my children, and my friends put them to bed for me. It happens, but that is why you have really good friends that you camp with that are okay with that. I've had people that, you know, it happens. You be better, you know, you try to be better. You get really close friends that will just help out, and it's valuable. There are times in court, I had somebody that said, I am watching your kids during court, and I was very, very adamant with my kids. And this is when my older ones did come in, and I said, during court, your brother and sister, your brothers will not come up and talk to me during court, because that is when I have my job. That is my personality. That is how I am. I did not allow my kids to come up during court. I found somebody that would be responsible for them and that could handle anything that came at them during that time. And that's just how I am. It was important to me that the court was a ceremony for the populace of my barony, and that was just really important to me.
Yeah, I think it is important to have a plan before you go in. You know, make a solid plan of how you want to handle it, and then communicate that plan with your children. Not that they necessarily listen, but but you know, have like we had conversations with our daughter about what was going to happen this evening, and I've had multiple side conversations now. but it's important to keep them as part of the loop, so they kind of have a feel for what is going to happen, you know, what you're going to do. I do have to admit that I am guilty of standing up in the middle of court and addressing my child as she was swinging a piece of wood on a rope, chasing another kid. I felt in the moment it was appropriate and nobody else. she was
I don't think there's any complaints.
there were no complaints, but it was a small event and she was beyond the last row of adults.
Oh no.
I have been guilty of just the same, but I'm saying my
Yeah.
ideal was.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Stjarna, if it makes you feel any better, get to put my children to bed, usually because I was looking forward to that time. But I have absolutely been guilty of getting to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and going, oh crap, I haven't fed the kids. I completely spaced, oh, I needed to make lunch. So yeah, it's nice to have an extra brain if they're available to you.
Yeah.
But I also adapted that. The way I brought food was not food that always had to be cooked. I brought a lot of things that my kids could self-serve. And yes, they ate a lot of really not so great food at events, but it's a weekend.
It is what it is.
They're alive. My kids are very, they can take care of themselves pretty well. And I also had rules. Here's a big one. As I got more involved in stuff, my teenage daughters knew that we had a conversation about her being in my encampment by a certain time at night. It's really easy for them to be walking around, and I hate to say it, there's people that you don't really want your teenage daughter around. And I said, I have really close friends that are camped with us. And you can bring anybody in here to sit around the campfire and talk, because I know that there's people around you that will keep you safe. And so that you set up a lot of things because you're going to be busy. There's things you do. But local event was very different than a kingdom level event.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah, and it's the kids do provide a lot of joy in many, many ways. They do provide that extra opportunity for connection with parts of your barony. But it is, again, another aspect of being a baronial coronet that you want to be sure that you discuss. Our daughter, if we were to take a 6-year term, we would wind up with a teenager by the end. So that's one of the things we've discussed. Like if we go for a longer term, one of the things we're going to have to consider is that the stresses related to our child is going to change. So it's going to be
less in some areas and more
so much
in
more in others. Yeah. Speaking of
what you find is as it's actually sort of harder to hit that 12-year-old age, because they actually have opinions and you have to respect those opinions. And sometimes they don't want to go to an event. They want to go to their friend's party, or they want to go to their sporting event. And it's really important that people really consider that before they take a coronet, because if your baronial event is on the same day as your kid's sporting event, how are you going to deal with that? Are they going without you? Because you have a responsibility to be at your baronial level event having court. I've actually gone to soccer games in my full Viking regalia. I was very warm, just for the record.
That sounds awesome, though.
But the field happened to be 15 minutes away, and I was able to get there before we had court. And that was, but my husband took over. He became the coronet while I was gone, having a partner that's willing to do that. But as you get to those teenage years, your kids are actually going to have lives, and you have to really consider that. They get busier. Little kids are actually easier to deal with. Then you just have to find somebody to watch them. Whereas the older kids actually want to do things on their own.
So that's a good, brings up another good question. Do any of you have any good tools for developing, that good work-life balance, or, SDA life balance?
I have the benefit of being a stay-at-home mom. As a baroness, I took on all the responsibilities, and my husband showed up and smiled. And I say that.
I am impressed with you both for that division of labor.
Now that changed when I became king and queen. He took over almost everything, and I just showed up and smiled. But I controlled almost everything, and I knew all of the things, and I would fill him in because he had to work. And he would get the weekends off to show up to the events, but he was busy. So.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that whole idea of setting up, those office hours. I can give you 100% of my attention, 5 days a week between these times. And at other times I may be available, but I can't guarantee it because, I have to work, or I have to take my kids to band, soccer, choir,
Yeah.
Aikido, whatever practice. So.
Yeah, I think I remember setting boundaries right away, even to the point where I would stand up in court and say, hey, we're not gonna listen to your complaints. If you should be talking to a police officer, go talk to the police. We're not police, we're not lawyers, we're not psychologists. Like, we literally said that in court. So come to us with baronial business and we'll listen, otherwise go somewhere else. That was the message right out of the gate. And I think that kind of kept me sane, but I have a hard time with the whole SCA life balance anyway. It usually bleeds over and the SCA wins. So I'm still here. So I guess that tells me something.
Yeah, and I think in the digital age, that's gotten both better and worse. Because when I was a sitting baroness, I had my Facebook Messenger available all the time. And sometimes I had to put it down and walk away. So
yeah, that was one of the boundaries that we drew very solidly even before we stepped up. We are responsible for the baronial pages and our personal Facebook pages, but beyond that, I am not responsible for what other people post on their personal page. Yep. If they have a problem, they need to address it to us through the appropriate channels. I don't need to be trolling my barony's social media to make sure that they're not posting something wrong. There are bounds to this, clearly, but that was our really hard and fast line, was I am not responsible for people's actions outside of my purview. That is their problem. That is not my problem. We are adults.
That's a good line, right? I approve.
Yeah.
Well, and then accepting that, for whatever decisions you make, 10% of the people are gonna hate you, 10% of the people are gonna love you, and 80% won't even know what the hell's going on anyway, right? So that was our kind of, okay, good. Off we go. It doesn't matter. There's always gonna be someone group who's upset with what you're doing. Just soldier on. As long as you're helping and it's in a good direction and you can reconcile it with your moral compass, off you go, right? No big deal. So we learned that right away, and I don't think I've ever really changed that in the FCA at all. If somebody's always going to be mad, let them vent.
I think personally for me, when people, what helps, explain a little bit. My past relationship was an alcoholic, so I do a lot of balance. So understanding that nothing is personal. If people have a problem, it's really not because of you. It is because of them. And when people in the SCA get upset or angry about something, it's because they love this game so much, and you're affecting their vision of it. It's not your duty to change their vision of it, but it gives you a little bit of understanding of why they're upset.
I have a question about Facebook. As Baron and Baroness, how do you participate in the baronial discussion? I mean, do you, or as Baron and Baroness, do you try not to dominate? You don't want to dominate it. I mean, that seems to be that's an area that when I was Baron and Baroness, of course, there was, 90 to 93, there was no Facebook. So it wasn't an issue, but I'm curious to see how some of you guys handle that.
Then?
I would say that typically what I would do is chime in on, say, a public discussion of the group. And if it were getting, say, heated, or if there was correction that may or may not have need to be made, I would offline it and message them privately and say, hey, I get what you're trying to say. Maybe the public forum isn't the best place for that. Feel free to, ping me with a more pointed question, or I would answer it sort of in a private message, so that it took a lot of that heavy discussion or maybe negatively directed discussion offline, because people want to know, and so they just blast everything everywhere. And you're like, whoa, like there's appropriate channels for all of that. Please follow. And being the baronial person, or the coronet, often being like what I call the regional PR manager, you're sort of the face that everybody goes to, but you're not really like the decision maker on like what the seneschal should be making the decision about. And so I'd often say, hey, here's our seneschal. Please have that discussion with them. And I would tip off to our seneschal, this is an incoming issue that needs to be handled offline. And it usually alleviated what was going on in the public forums.
Yeah, social media can be it can be a difficult place to navigate. Over the last couple of years, I have actually almost completely disappeared from social media. It's not always the best option. Fortunately, His Excellency is still able to fully engage. Mental health is a thing, and balancing that with Facebook in particular can be a little tricky. Which is why if someone were to step in, don't do what I did and just keep your personal page. It's have a separate page so you can log in or out of one or the other, and not have everything coming in all at once. It is important to at least engage a bit. His Excellency shares really terrible dad jokes all the time on our page, because our barony is known for really terrible dad jokes. But yeah, social media it's an interesting thing. Again, on the list of things that you need to discuss as a baronial coronet pair, you need to have a strong idea of, what will we do if, one of us decides to disappear for a year on Facebook.
Right. The other thing that I had to personally really chew on for a while, I got the pleasure of being a sitting baroness during the whole BLM protests and a very challenging administration. And there was a lot of very hot tempers about a lot of things. I realize it hasn't necessarily cooled down, so I'm sure there are other people that can relate, but I really had to take a moment and think about, what does Whitney think versus what does Anna think? And even if they didn't necessarily align, I had to really step back and say, is this useful? Is it necessary? Is it courteous? And approach interactions with the understanding that I was not just expressing my own opinion in that forum because it was an STA forum. And even if it was a topic I felt strongly about, I had to be very careful about whether I interacted at all, and if I did, how things were worded, because myself as a baroness and myself as a modern person sometimes could not overlap completely and still be doing good for the society itself. I hope that makes sense.
Fully makes sense, and I 100% agree with that, Anna. And I don't get involved on Facebook if I'm wearing a coronet or a crown, or heck, because it'll just turn into a rant, and no one wants that. So I use Facebook to look in at the group. I'm not currently a coronet of any group, so I'm just dealing with the crown, but I'll look at the group. What are they posting? And if I think that I need to give my official declaration of whatever on Facebook, then I'll do it as a crown or as a coronet, and I'll do it through an official channel. I won't, post up to reply to someone's Facebook post. I just if I did that, I'd be on Facebook for 14 hours and everyone would hate me.
Oh.
So because I'm so opinionated, and that's not what the job needs. The job needs direction, not, you know, I don't need to solve all these problems on Facebook. So I stay out of it. I think I try and do what Anna suggested as much as possible. I do that by going through the official channel.
Yeah, I feel social media aside, my failures as a Baron have been when I express my opinion when I really shouldn't have. So sometimes
Clovis, sometimes that mute button is really hard to push.
Yeah.
I support you, man. I get it. Sometimes it's like, I can't.
Totally.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah, and I am perhaps too active on social media, at least for my mental health. But you know, yeah, I try and keep my interactions on social media either dad joke related or very specific business of the Barony related. So something to, you know, make sure people still have humor, especially in our Barony, because humor is like, it is
The foundation.
Foundation of our Barony. We have puns that go back to the beginning. So I mean, and those are the traditions I do want to keep alive. But yeah, where's I going with this? I don't know. But yeah, I think yeah, use your opinions very sparingly when it comes to social media, unless it's positive to uplift somebody. Otherwise, when you reprimand somebody, it should be direct in person and not public. So if you have a problem that you need to address, it's something that sometimes a phone call or a in-person meeting is better.
And also be aware, I think what we're saying without saying is be aware that what you post on your personal page is a reflection of you as a coronet, unless you have made very strong separations between a personal account and an SCA account. You might not intend it to be that way, but one of the reasons I have dropped so much of my Facebook interactions is because I have a lot of opinions. And there are lots of things that I want to say, but without the opportunity to have a full-fledged conversation around that two-sentence opinion, I can damage my barony. I can cause a rupture that I don't even know is there. And so for me, the safest thing was just kind of go away for a while. But oh, wait, I'm sorry. Did you tell her to eat it out of?
No, I did not tell
Okay.
her to get it out of the cart. Go put it in a bowl.
Sorry, ice cream has just appeared on my couch with a child. I'm really unsure how this happened. But yes.
I think you said that really well. I really, my social interaction has decreased greatly since I started wearing anything on my head. Because when you say something, it carries a lot more weight and it can be something that you didn't even think about, and all of a sudden it blows up. And so I do everything personal.
And with a cornet, it's your job is to be positive. Your job is to not be negative. And Facebook right now tends to be a negative sort of thing, right? Well, for me, I'll speak for me. And so I read something and I'm like, that ain't the way it goes. And then I hammer out my comment and it's a reaction to what's happening. And that's not my job if I have a cornet on my head. My job when I have a cornet on my head is to say, that's a great idea. I love this thing. Thank you for this. These are all good ideas that you've given us, right? Like that. That's the position. And I find Facebook doesn't really cater to that. So at least my impulsive Facebook posting. So yeah, I prefer to do it in person and be positive and put that spin on it. And I try now to make my Facebook into, hey, that's cool. I like this. You know, keep making that thing that you're making, you know, jump in on arts and sciences pages or whatever. I believe the SCA needs more of that. And I really believe, and I know it's a different topic, that electronic SCA, the ESCA needs way, way, way more of that. So that's, I think, our goal as leaders. And with the cornet on your head, you certainly fit that. description.
Yeah, it's been an interesting transition because everything became much more electronic very, very quickly. And so trying to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work. And I think it's on top of a transition that was already occurring, you know, as we get new apps every 3 months that, you know, all the kids are on this new app and I'm like, oh, Twitter, we should try that. I've heard it does good things.
The thing for me was I could always accept that if I said something in a court or had a conversation with someone and said something and they took it completely wrong and ran with it in a different direction, I could always assume that, well, maybe I screwed that up somehow, or maybe it's not on them, maybe it's me, maybe my communication skills aren't that great. And now when I plunk it out in black and white, even if it's on Facebook and they still run in the wrong direction, I'm like, what the heck just happened there? So that's the second problem that I have with Facebook is it doesn't matter what your direction is. It's much the same as art, where, you know, someone's going to take it and spin it their way and move it in their direction. So I think that's the secondary, not trap with Facebook, but that's the thing you have to be aware of, is that what you put down there, no matter what your intentions are, no matter how carefully you craft your paragraph, it's not gonna reach people exactly the way you want it to. And I think it's easier to accept that in the SCA with a crowd of people where you say something as a cornet in court than it is to say something on Facebook and then have everybody ride off into the sunset with a totally different message, in my opinion.
So that is the very reason why I edit, you know, even, because I do know that in general, people, their motivations are positive, but sometimes it doesn't always sound quite right when it comes out. So if you think that you didn't say something quite right, I definitely edit it out. So
you should definitely review some of the things I said earlier.
Yeah, you can edit up that whole rant if you want to. That's fine.
No, you're good. But so really quickly, it is a little after 9 o'clock. I don't know how other people's schedules are. Do we want to continue having a conversation, or are people getting ready to turn in for the evening?
So I just want to say really quick, I love this conversation a lot. I'm an hour ahead of you, and I am gonna duck out. But I just wanted to say thanks very much. It's a lot of fun to listen to what everybody is dealing with and the different thoughts and ideas. That's my favorite part of the SCA. So we still think of Vontier even though we're not a part of Vontier, and I love hearing everyone's experiences. That's really good. So thanks very much.
Well,
yeah.
To me, our cousins in Abacal are still our cousins.
We miss Vontier a lot. I mean, that'll be my closing.
Well, we miss you too.
Cheers. Yeah. Thanks.
And thank you for taking the time to join us. It's been wonderful to have the different perspectives that we've had. We've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for asking. I learned a lot tonight, and that's a really good thing.
I look forward to meeting you in person one day. So
yeah, hopefully. Hey, everyone, we just want to come back to regular events and then go visit Vontier again and go to a crown or a big event for sure.
Yeah. Just look out for plates of cookies from Terra Pomaria.
Yeah, that sounds like a no. If I do, I'm checking the bottom of the plate.
They're really yummy until you get to the bottom.
Yeah.
Can I make a request for Nanaimo bars, Vic?
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Everyone's gonna get ketchup chips. That's what I remember.
Ketchup chips, delicious. Yeah.
Ketchup chips. Yeah, or it was either that or our T3s, right?
Yeah.
T3s. Children, I want those.
I'll set up for real cider, like real cider.
I'm gonna be honest. You're gonna get me, and that's all you're gonna get.
I'll take it. It's okay.
I guess we can settle if we must.
I'll bring Aisha because her royal majesty keeps me in check. So that's what we
Excellent.
Okay, team.
Thank you all. I also have to
have a good evening.
Log out.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Likewise for me, 5:30 comes early.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Do you want some final words before you go? Some wisdom?
I had an absolute blast. If you're even thinking about doing this, go for it. There will be people to support you no matter what. And there's always a ton of cousins to rely on, and the crown is always there for support no matter what. So you always have somebody to reach out to, and anybody that was on this panel is a wealth of information. Seek out those that have done it before, and I just say go for it. It was the time of my life in the SCA, and it was definitely a launching point into a next level. So
Thank you
Ben.
very much. Thank you again for joining us as well. I tried not to do that. I was tempted.
okay.
Stjarna, do you have any final words of wisdom?
I do think that if you're willing to dedicate your life to your barony for a few years, do it. 3 is great. 5 or 6 is, I think, better, especially if you're being effective in your barony, and be realistic about it. Your job is to make that barony amazing, and you are there for the people. And that's all I have to say is do it for the people.
Yeah.
It's rewarding. Seeing their smiling faces and giving them
Yes, I really appreciate your perspective. You've actually talked about several things that I had not actually thought about, and I see we learn things in every class.
Well, I think that after we step down, we'll know more as we have time to process
Yes.
everything that we just went through.
Hindsight is 20/20. Just saying.
And that was one of the primary reasons.
I'm going to put one last thing, I think. One of the big things that I think my husband and I, but mostly me and my talking in Noble Estates changed. First of all, everybody should know that Noble Estates is open to anybody. You can attend that meeting, even if you are not a coronet. But what that used to be was all the Baron and Baronesses at the time, sorry, coronets, we get together and do like an ad. They would talk forever about the event that they're about ready to have. And I finally went, stop. If you're having an event on the west side, we're probably having one on the east side. If we want to go to your event, we will come. You don't need to do an ad for that. And we changed the format to say, what are your problems? What are the things that are working for you? Because that kind of conversation became much more valuable, and it shortened the meeting. We really, it's actually very valuable to find out what all of their names are, because you don't always see all of them, and you can form that bond. But going to that meeting, you find out what kind of things they're really dealing with in their baronies, the challenges, how are they getting the word out? How are they bringing people in? Those are the things that are really valuable in Noble Estates, because that is our main concern. We're creating the community in our barony, and that is what we need to do. If people want to come to our events, wonderful.
Yeah, I will second that like completely. The transition to the online discussion of like, hey, here's our event, cool beans, happened, and then like when we were posting, I think especially when you and Stjarna were on there, it was list your like top 3 issues, and people knew in advance like that was the issue that would potentially be discussed. And you got a lot of me too, like, oh yeah, we're totally having that same problem, like how are you handling that? And then it was this fruitful discussion at Noble Estate outside of, hey, come to my this event, and hey, come to my this event, and hope you're not busy on this weekend, because you know, that kind of stuff. So it was great.
Sometimes we discuss war, but that's just fun.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. We discuss war all the time because we're constantly fomenting war with our neighbors. I mean, we haven't managed to like get a solid one on the books yet, but
real quick, Althea makes a really great comment. She said, I didn't know Noble Estate was an open meeting. I think it's a great opportunity for people interested in being the baronets or coronets, simply learning more about how to contribute to our community. That's a really great comment.
I don't think a lot of people know that it is open.
Yeah,
And
I didn't know that up until tonight.
yeah.
I do believe that some people might question it, but it is truly an open meeting. It is not a peerage meeting. So
We had a member of our populace, Berengaria, who would sometimes attend Noble Estate. But thank you.
All right. Well, it looks like it's just us.
Just
We'll
us.
let you go to bed.
Okay. It was
Thank you
wonderful.
again.
Thank
Yeah.
you for asking me. So I hope I helped.
Oh,
Oh,
you
yeah,
did.
Absolutely.
It was a delight to have you, and we will see you again.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.
Okay.